Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about challenges. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, in your opinion, what are the key factors that make software development very challenging? Well, this is one of those questions that I love to ask because it's the one of those questions that, depending on usually your seniority or your life experiences and stuff like that, you're going to have different levels of an answer. And let's see if you can spot my biases and sort of the things that I deal with based on my answer. So what I usually say is the most challenging things for me at this level, because I've gone to a point now where I don't feel as much challenged from technical things anymore. There are situations where like it is damn challenging. The worst thing I know is to deal with high abstraction systems where you're dealing with something where it's difficult for you to, like, there's very flaky documentation and you don't really know how to debug something, or you don't know how to configure something so that it actually gives you the output. You don't have any decent feedback system or anything like that when you're dealing with something, and as I said, you have no way of sort of navigating. You're just sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall or poking things with a stick to just see, can I reverse engineer how this thing works? That's something that is challenging. But if we're going to talk at a more high level, like just general concept, I find that the most important factor that actually makes software development so challenging has to do with synchronization of minds, or like the people that are working on the system, the product, whatever it is. So whenever you're dealing with software development, one of the things that I like to make an analogy to is that if someone writes some code, like let's say you have a software developer who is given a task or something like that, it is vital that that individual has the skills, the holistic understanding, like all of these different factors that are necessary in order to write that software in such a way that it fills the business need, but it is also comprehensible to all the other people working there. And this is where the trouble usually starts, because you usually have software developers who have different skill levels, and not only skill level, different ways of thinking about a problem. And that synchronization is so important, and it is the reason why you have so many sync meetings and so many understanding and alignments and so forth, because the problem is that when you're dealing with, like I've explained it to my girlfriend a few times, imagine like you're sitting down and taking a math test, and some other person has been there before you and done half of the formulas, and you're going to continue on the formula to get some output, and then you continue and then you try to check it and it's wrong. All right, now you have to debug, or like you have to go and check your own work and the work of the other person, and depending on your styles of thinking, or like how you structure your formulas or how you set things up, it's going to be really tough, or it's going to be very easy. If you're sort of the same types of thinkers, and you use the same basic abstractions in your head, and you have the same way of structuring the thing, it might be very easy for you, or at least very less painful. But if it's not, then you're stuck. You basically have to redo the whole thing because you can't progress. And this is the thing that I tell software developers all the time. This is one of the reasons why I tell people keep it simple, stupid, and have a high disposable setup where you can just throw things away. Because even if you write really, really good software or a very clever solution, as I've said to the gurus, you can be the smartest person in the world and you can create the best solution that you could possibly create. But the problem is that when somebody else who is of less skill than you comes in and tries to add new functionality or do something with it, it's incomprehensible to them. And so they have to throw it away because they don't possess the necessary mental skills to actually deal with the situation, which now stops them from doing their work. And so what I tell people is that this is the core problem, to find the sweet spot where the code, or like the thing that you are building, doesn't have to be code, it can be an entire system. It has to fill the needs without stopping future development. And that is what I call complexity, dealing with complexity over time, which is, as I say, I've said many times before, guys, this is, in my opinion, the hardest problem there is in software development. No question about it. because your code goes through multiple developers. Many people will work on it, different types of skill levels, different types of backgrounds, different types of thinking strategy, like people who think in different ways and abstract in different ways. This is why we created conventions, linters, norms for how to do things, and we try to align and so forth, because in essence what we're trying to achieve is to have a close enough approximation of how to deal with certain problems, to align our way of thinking closely enough that anybody can solve the problem. It's very similar to construction work and so forth. Like the idea, and if you have a bricklayer, or like someone's going to build a brick wall, there are practices for how to do that. So if they have to stop halfway through, you could hire somebody else to continue the work, and the wall is still going to be built. It's still going to be of decent quality. That is the hardest thing. Because when it comes to software and development, it's not like building a brick wall. Like, I'm not saying that it's an easy thing. I'm saying that in software development you have a lot of different experiences, a lot of ground to cover. Some people are really good in one thing of all of these different tools and ways of working and how to do everything, and some people are super weak in some people are strong in it, some are weak in different areas, some have like different flavors of doing things, some don't actually have the skills necessary. Like, there are these different types. It's one of the things that as an example, if you ask a front-end developer where their weakness lies, most of them will say CSS. And the front-end developer, like, that's nigh on, like, is the styling and like setting all of that up. That's a really major part of creating a UI interface. If you ask back-end developers, most of them don't feel really comfortable with DevOps or operation. Like, a lot of them, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of people, like, they don't know how to use their infrastructure or their Azure setups and stuff like that. And due to the fact that they're limited in that, we have to do the thing that we are doing these days, which is to hire someone else, or like, you get a DevOps specialist or someone there or so forth. And now the problems start coming, because now you have more than one person, and they all have to have basically the same idea of how to make each other effective at delivering on those end goals. And that is a nightmare to deal with. More often than not, I hear, like, every single time, if we take backend and DevOps as an example, most of the times the developers are unhappy with the ops people because things are either not working, or they're setting things up but they're not really being responsive and stuff like that, because they have not really either the resources or the understanding necessary or so forth to set things up so that it meets the criteria or like the expectations of the software developers. And in turn, the software developers do the same thing towards the product, where like the classic one is, they skip on unit tests and they hack things together, and like the system is always broken, but and nobody's really happy with the system, but they don't feel for some reason any accountability, or they're lacking this and that. Everybody sort of, they put on their own victim, like they basically put themselves in the victim role, regardless of where you are. Like, from your perspective, you're always the victim. There's always someone else to blame or so forth, which causes all of this stuff, right? And this is the thing that I argue is the core and most fundamental problem, because you have so many areas of skill that you have to master in order to deliver effective software. Because if you think about the path that code has to take from your laptop all the way into production, and then have all of that work and just always run as efficiently as possible with constant updates, with new tools and different ideas and concepts and so forth, there's a million tools. There's a million different people involved in different stages of the life cycle of an IT company, and like different departments and stuff like that. And all of them have a different personality. In many cases, they have different levels of skill, and they have different ways of thinking about things. And there's so many different tools and areas of mastery that you have to be really good at to get like the end thing to be really, really good. Well, I'm honestly amazed that we produce software at all. In many cases. So what I want you to take away from this is that my personal opinion, the key factors that make development very challenging is basically that the ecosystem, like the area of software development and all the different tools and all the things you have to know in order to deliver software, is gigantic. It's one of those key things that you as a junior will realize very quickly, that if you take one bootcamp or two, doesn't really matter, and you learn just the basics of how the coding, like the programming language works and stuff like that, you've just scratched the surface of the entire ecosystem of things that are around you that is necessary for you to get software into production. A classic one is, as I say to this front-end developers, learn Docker and Node.js. I promise you, you will be served by it. And those things don't necessarily have anything to do with the UI, for example, but you're probably going to work in a company that uses containerization or VMs or something like that, and well, the backend developers are probably not going to help you with that because maybe they don't even know, or they, depend on company structure. So there you are. Now you're junior DevOps person because you have to be, otherwise you can't get the code into production, which is where the value comes. And when you think about all the things that you have to know, your coworkers have to know, your PO has to know, and you have to align all of these people with the DevOps people, and everybody has to have the same rough understanding of what you're going to achieve together, and you also have to have the same priorities, the same work, roughly the same work motivation, and you have to know how to do, when to make a solution very sophisticated because it has to be, and when to make it more accessible because you have juniors that are dealing with the problem as well, and then you leave the company, somebody else comes in and they think that everything you ever did was shit because they just think in a functional way, etc., etc. These are the problems, and that is the essence of when I say complexity over time. How do you deal with it? Have a great day.